My name is Jennifer, and the night my marriage cracked open did not begin with shouting or slammed doors. It began with silence and a note. The silence lived in Daniel's office tower. One of those glass and steel fortresses built to pierce the sky and impress anyone standing beneath it. I knew every corner of that building, yet I never felt like I belonged there. The receptionists with perfect smiles, the endless walls of glass, the scent of polished marble. It all belonged to Daniel. He had risen high enough to believe he breathed a thinner air than the rest of us. That evening, I had brought him a bottle of Bordeaux, his favorite, tucked neatly into my purse. I thought perhaps we might share a small moment together, a reminder of the warmth we once had when our home was small and our love was loud. But even as I stepped into his office suite, I felt the coldness wrap around me. Daniel was on the phone, his voice smooth, his laugh sharp. He barely looked up as I entered, only giving me the kind of distracted smile a man gives a stranger on a train. Behind the desk, his secretary Elise offered a polite greeting. Her eyes, though, were different. Tense. Guarded. She watched Daniel's door as though something dangerous hid behind it. I lingered while Daniel finished his call. When I turned to leave, Elise moved suddenly, her heels tapping quickly against the floor. She brushed close enough that only I could hear her whisper, "Be careful." And before I could react, she slipped something into my purse. Her hands trembled. Our eyes met, hers wide, urgent, frightened. Then she returned to her desk as though nothing had happened. The weight of that tiny scrap of paper burned against my side for hours. That night, back at home, Daniel fell asleep on the sofa with his laptop glowing across his face. His tie was loosened, his shoes kicked off, his phone left carelessly on the coffee table. He looked like a man who trusted his world too much. In our bedroom, I finally reached into my purse. My fingers closed around folded paper. I opened it, heart hammering. Check his second phone. I froze. At first, my mind scrambled for excuses. Elise was mistaken. She was trying to stir drama. Maybe she resented Daniel. But why the fear in her eyes? Why the risk? Secretaries don't slip notes to wives unless the truth is heavy enough to drown them both. I returned to the living room. Daniel mumbled in his sleep, scrolling half-formed words across the air. His phone sat within reach, but Elise's note wasn't about that one. My gaze traveled across the room, up the staircase, toward the office drawers, the coat closet, the bags he kept packed for travel. Somewhere in this house, a second phone hid. My chest burned as I searched, moving carefully so as not to wake him. In his study, I found nothing. In his coat, only receipts from restaurants I didn't recognize. But in his travel bag, tucked into the lining behind his cufflinks case, I found it. A sleek black phone. No case. No scratches. Clean, like it had been kept hidden from the world. It buzzed faintly in my hand, alive with secrets. I unlocked it with his birthday, a code he always used. The screen lit and my world tilted. Messages poured across the screen. Last night was perfect. Friday again? She suspects nothing. Names I didn't know, hotels I'd never been to, photographs blurred with intimacy. His hand on another woman's waist, his face pressed against hair that wasn't mine, a selfie from a bed that wasn't ours. The room seemed to spin. My pulse thundered. Elise's warning rang louder with every line I read. I closed the phone, clutching it against my chest. Daniel stirred in the living room, his laptop sliding from his lap. His mouth curved in a half-smile even in sleep. And in that moment I saw him not as my husband, not as the man I once believed in, but as a stranger who had played me like a fool. I whispered into the dark, my voice trembling but sharp. "You think I don't know? But I do now." The second phone burned in my hand like proof of betrayal. Proof Elise had risked her job to reveal. Proof that would become the first stone in a wall I would build against him. Because the phone was not the end. It was the door. And once I stepped through it, I discovered not only his betrayals, but the key to his destruction. The phone in my hand felt heavier than iron. I sat on the edge of our bed, my pulse hammering so loudly I thought it might wake Daniel. His steady breathing drifted down the hall from the living room, soft and even, as though the world had not just shattered in my hands. I turned the screen back on. More messages appeared, stretching down like a bottomless pit. She believed my excuse again. Too easy. Same sweet as last time. Keep the champagne cold. No photos this time. We can't risk her seeing. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep scrolling. Each message was a needle, each photo a cut. Different women, different hotels, receipts snapped in dimly lit rooms, his tie loosened, his grin careless. It was not a single affair, it was a pattern. A second life. One message caught me hardest. She's blind, Daniel. You could tell her the sky is green, and she'd smile and nod. I set the phone down, bile rising in my throat. Blind. That was how he saw me. Not as a wife, not as a partner, but as a fool too trusting to notice. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a breath, steadying myself. Rage without clarity was chaos. I needed clarity. Carefully, I opened his photo gallery. My fingers shook as I swiped through images I had never been meant to see. There were dinners in restaurants I had never visited, vacations in cities I had never stepped foot in, and candid shots of him holding women close. But it wasn't only romance. There were documents too, screenshots of financial statements, names of offshore accounts, invoices labeled under shell companies. I frowned, scrolling faster. This wasn't just adultery. It was something deeper. Why would he keep those files here, hidden on a secret phone? I didn't have time to linger. A sound from the living room made me freeze. Daniel shifted in his sleep, muttering something unintelligible. My heart leapt into my throat. I locked the phone quickly and slipped it back into the bag where I had found it. My body shook as I pulled the zipper closed, as if sealing the betrayal inside could keep it from spilling further. The next morning, I moved through the kitchen on autopilot. Daniel was chipper, humming as he buttered his toast, his suit crisp and freshly pressed. He kissed my cheek like he hadn't spent the night before in another woman's bed. I forced a smile, gripping my coffee mug so tightly my knuckles whitened. I might be late tonight, he said casually. Board meeting. I stared at him, my mind screaming with images of the phone. Hotel keys. Whispered lies. Photographs of him smiling the way he never smiled at me anymore. I nodded slowly. Of course. He winked. Good girl. The words sliced deep. When he left for work, I collapsed into the kitchen chair, my whole body trembling. Elisa's note lay in my mind like a brand. She had known. She had wanted me to see. Why? Out of pity? Out of guilt? Or because even she couldn't stomach his lies anymore? By noon, I drove back to his office tower. My palms were slick against the steering wheel, but my purpose felt sharper now. I needed answers. Elise looked up as I entered, her face pale. She rose quickly, ushering me into a quiet corner near the elevators. You found it, she whispered. I nodded, my voice raw. How long have you known? Her eyes darted nervously around the lobby. Long enough. Too long. He isn't who you think he is, Jennifer. It's not just the women. It's the money, the deals, the lies. I couldn't stay silent anymore. My stomach twisted. Why tell me? She hesitated, then whispered. Because one day, he'll bury you in those lies if you don't stop him first. Her words echoed in my chest long after I left. The betrayal was bigger than infidelity. It was a web, and I was tangled at the center. That night, when Daniel returned home, he carried himself with the swagger of a man convinced of his invincibility. He poured wine, toasted to another successful deal, and never noticed the way I studied him with new eyes. In that moment, I made a vow. He thought I was blind. He thought I was weak. He thought the note in my purse had gone unnoticed. But I had seen. And now I would watch. I would gather. I would wait. Because Daniel didn't realize that the woman he had dismissed as blind had just opened her eyes, and she would never close them again. The second phone had revealed his betrayal. But as I began to dig deeper, I realized it also contained the blueprint for his downfall. The second phone had opened a crack in the wall of lies Daniel built around me. Now, I needed to widen that crack until the whole structure collapsed. For days, I lived in two worlds. By morning, I was the quiet wife making breakfast, nodding politely at his excuses about late meetings. By night, after he fell asleep, I turned into an archivist of betrayal. I spread papers across my desk like puzzle pieces. I copied text threads from the secret phone into a notebook, writing every date, every name, every location. I took screenshots, sent them to a secure drive under a false name, and hid the backups where Daniel would never think to look. First, it was the women. Dozens of them. The phone was a gallery of deceit, Hotel reservations, receipts for jewelry I had never seen, photos of dinners lit by candles I had never sat across from. I catalogued them all, each one a stone in the wall of evidence I was building. But Elise had warned me it was more than infidelity, so I dug deeper. In the phone's encrypted folder, I found invoices tied to shell companies I didn't recognize. Transfers of money to accounts offshore, sometimes small amounts, sometimes staggering sums. Names I had never heard. Yet dates and signatures that bore Daniel's mark. I printed everything. Tucking the pages into a binder, I labeled with nothing but a black dot. The first of many. Each day sharpened my instincts. I watched Daniel closely, studying the tells I had ignored before. The way he avoided eye contact when mentioning business trips. The way he smiled too quickly when I asked about expenses. The faint cologne that lingered on his shirts, not mine, not ours. I became a shadow in my own home, but a shadow with eyes open. One night, while he showered, I searched his briefcase. Inside, I found receipts from an upscale hotel downtown. The total was obscene, more than most people's monthly rent. I snapped photos, slid them back, and returned the case before the water stopped running. Another evening, while Daniel hosted a conference call, I checked the phone records on his primary device. Buried among his legitimate contacts were numbers saved only with initials. I matched them against the secret phone. They aligned perfectly. The puzzle grew clearer. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He was funding his betrayals with money siphoned from accounts he had no right to touch. Money that should have gone into investments, into our future, into the company he claimed to protect. Elise's warning echoed. It's the money. The deals. The lies. The realization chilled me. This wasn't simply about broken vows. This was about survival. If Daniel's schemes unraveled, they would try to drag me down with him. I had to protect myself, my name, my legacy. So I doubled down. Julia, my oldest friend, noticed my exhaustion and pressed me until I confessed part of the truth. Not everything, not yet, but enough. She brought me an encrypted drive and showed me how to secure files with layers of passwords. Together, we scanned documents late into the night, cataloging everything. You're building a case, she whispered. No, I replied, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. I'm building a weapon. Julia squeezed my hand. Then you'll need allies. Because if Daniel is as ruthless as this shows, he won't go down quietly. Her words stayed with me. Allies. I had one in Julia, another in Elise, and perhaps more if I dared to seek them. But for now my focus was evidence. Proof so irrefutable that even Daniel's silver tongue and expensive lawyers could not twist it. The binders grew. One, then two, then three. Hidden in plain sight behind innocuous labels on my bookshelf. Each held a piece of Daniel's downfall. And still I pretended. I smiled across the dinner table, asked about his meetings, kissed his cheek as he left for the office. All the while, I wrote the story of his destruction in black ink and screenshots. But with each discovery came a question I could not silence. If Daniel could betray me so easily, who else was he betraying? His partners? His investors? The law itself? I didn't know. Yet, because the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about crimes. And if I didn't act fast, Daniel's secrets could swallow me whole. The binders on my shelf grew heavier each day, but so did the weight in my chest. I had evidence now, more than enough to prove Daniel's betrayals, but evidence without allies was only paper. I could not walk into court alone, not against a man who had built his world on charm, manipulation, and money. Julia was my first anchor. She refused to let me drown in silence. Almost every night, she came to my apartment, bringing food I never touched and tea that went cold as we pored over documents together. She scanned receipts, cross-checked dates, highlighted contradictions in Daniel's explanations. You're not crazy, she whispered one night, sliding a stack of hotel invoices across the table. Look, he was supposedly in Geneva on business, but here's a charge from a restaurant in New York on the same day. He can't hide forever. Her certainty steadied me. Daniel had gaslighted me for years, subtly and expertly, making me doubt my instincts. Julia restored them. Still, I needed more than friendship. I needed someone who could stand against Daniel's legal machinery. That was when Julia mentioned Evelyn Ross. She's a lawyer, Julia explained, her eyes sharp. She's taken down men wealthier than Daniel. Ruthless when she needs to be, but fair. If you want not just protection but victory, she's the one. The next morning I sat in Evelyn's office, a modest space compared to Daniel's glass towers. She was in her 40s, with a calm presence and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. As I laid out my binders, my notes, my screenshots, she listened in silence. When I finished, she tapped her pen against the desk. You've done most of my work already. But evidence alone doesn't win. Presentation does. We'll need to show a pattern: deliberate, sustained betrayal, both marital and financial. If we time it right, we won't just win. We'll break him. Her words lit something inside me. Break him. That was what I wanted. Not only survival, but justice sharp enough to leave scars. Evelyn agreed to take the case. She instructed me to keep documenting, to record every inconsistency, every lie. The court doesn't respond to emotions, she said. It responds to facts so undeniable even the most expensive lawyer cannot twist them. I left her office lighter, yet also heavier with purpose. For the first time I had someone who believed me, who saw Daniel clearly, without his charm clouding the truth. Elise too became part of the circle. I met her quietly at a cafe far from the office. Her hand shook as she passed me a folder. These are expense reports, she whispered. On the surface they look legitimate, but half of them are cover-ups. He made me file them. I can't do it anymore. I squeezed her hand. Why risk this for me? Her eyes glistened. Because one day someone has to stop him. And because I don't want to watch him bury you in lies. Her courage stunned me. Elise had risked her career, her safety, perhaps even more. With her documents, Julia's vigilance, and Evelyn's strategy, the shape of resistance finally began to form. At home, Daniel still moved with arrogant ease, completely unaware of the quiet war gathering around him. He boasted about deals, hummed while shaving, kissed my cheek like a man who believed his mask would never slip. But I no longer saw him as my husband. I saw him as a defendant. Each night I practiced wearing my own mask, calm, gentle, unquestioning. Behind it I sharpened every piece of evidence, every plan. Patience became my weapon. One evening Julia leaned across the table, her voice low but fierce. He thinks you're blind, Jennifer. Let him think it. The longer he underestimates you, the harder the fall will be. Her words struck me like steel. Yes, I would let him believe in his invincibility. I would let him believe in my silence. And then, at the right moment, I would peel back the curtain and watch his world collapse. Because Evelyn had promised me something chilling and exhilarating in equal measure. We will not just expose him in court. We will choose the moment, the audience, and the spotlight. And when we do, Daniel will never recover. Evelyn's office became our war room. The modest space, with its bookshelves heavy with legal volumes and its single broad window overlooking the city, was transformed into the command center of a quiet revolution. On her desk, my binders sat like soldiers waiting to be deployed. Julia perched on the edge of a chair with her laptop, cross-referencing receipts. Elise's folder of falsified expense reports lay open, pages marked with yellow notes. I sat in the center of it all, my hands clasped tightly, my heartbeat steadying with every passing hour. Evelyn stood, her pen tapping rhythmically against her palm. Daniel thinks this is a game he already won, she said. But arrogance blinds men like him. Our job is not only to prove the truth, it is to time its release so that he cannot escape. She spread documents across the desk like puzzle pieces. First, the marriage. The photos, the hotel invoices, the secret phone. They show repeated, deliberate infidelity. No judge will dismiss them. Second, the money. Offshore accounts, shell companies, falsified reports. This moves it from betrayal into fraud. If we expose this at the right moment, he risks not just divorce but ruin. Her voice was calm, precise, merciless. Julia leaned forward, eyes narrowed. So how do we hit hardest? What's the moment that crushes him? Evelyn tapped one document, the invitation to a charity gala Daniel himself had boasted about. Here. 2 weeks from now, he plans to stand before investors, donors, and the press, announcing his latest venture. We file our complaint that morning. By evening, as he toasts his brilliance, the truth will flood every screen. The man who wanted to be admired will be humiliated in the very spotlight he craves. The image seared itself into my mind. Daniel raising a glass, cameras flashing, and then his phone buzzing with headlines tearing down everything he had built on lies. I exhaled slowly. He humiliated me in silence. I want him humiliated in sound, cameras, questions, the weight of every stare. Evelyn's lips curved into a small, sharp smile. Then that's what you'll have. The following nights blurred into one long preparation. Julia combed through Daniel's social media posts, matching them with charges on his cards. Elise quietly forwarded me copies of new expense reports he forced her to file, proof that his schemes hadn't stopped. I annotated every receipt, cross-referenced every bank transfer, built timelines that revealed just how systematic his deceit was. The counterplan grew into something alive. Not just defense but attack. Not just protection but exposure. And yet, beneath the steady progress, unease lingered. Anonymous messages had begun appearing again, short, sharp, and chilling. Be careful. He's not the only one with secrets. Expose him and you'll burn too. I showed one to Evelyn. She read it then set it aside. Empty threats. Shadows trying to frighten you. Focus on Daniel. Once he falls, the rest will scatter. But at night, lying in bed beside the man who thought me blind, I felt the weight of those words pressing down. Shadows do not waste time on the powerless. Whoever sent them knew I was a threat. Daniel moved through the apartment with careless confidence, humming as he shaved, sipping wine as though his world was secure. He did not notice the quiet change in me, the way my eyes no longer softened when I looked at him, the way my smile became a mask rehearsed in silence. One evening, as he bragged about a new business partner, I pressed my glass against my lips to hide the smirk forming. He was building his own stage. He had no idea it would become his scaffold. Julia's words echoed. He thinks you're blind. Let him think it. Evelyn's voice followed. We will not just expose him. We will own the room. And Elise's whisper lingered still. He'll bury you in his lies if you don't stop him first. I was no longer afraid. I was waiting. Because as the day of the gala approached, Daniel made a move that even Evelyn hadn't predicted. One bold enough to threaten the timing of our plan, and reckless enough to unravel everything if I wasn't ready. The morning of the gala arrived like the calm before a storm. I woke before dawn, the sky outside still indigo, the city silent beneath a veil of mist. Daniel lay beside me, breathing deeply, his hands stretched lazily across the sheets as if nothing in the world could touch him. But everything was about to touch him. Evelyn's team had filed the complaint just after sunrise. The documents, pages of contracts, receipts, photos, transfers, were now sealed in the court system, ready for a judge to review. Copies had been discreetly prepared for select journalists. All that remained was timing. I dressed carefully, choosing a gown that was simple, black, and deliberate. No glitter. No sparkle. Just presence. Julia helped zip me in, her hands trembling slightly. Tonight, he'll think you're there to watch him shine, she whispered. But you'll be there to watch him burn. I nodded, though my stomach twisted. Because as ready as I felt, something in me still braced for the unknown. By noon, Evelyn called with updates. The filings went smoothly. His lawyer hasn't responded yet, but they will soon. Once the gala begins, the press will be armed with the truth. All you need to do is be there. Her voice was steady, reassuring, but it couldn't drown out the memory of the anonymous messages. Expose him and you'll burn too. The unease deepened in the afternoon when Elise called me from a blocked number. Her voice shook. Jennifer, something's wrong. He knows. I don't know how, but he suspects something. My grip on the phone tightened. What did he say? He's been restless all morning, she whispered. Pacing, making calls. He canceled 2 meetings, then told me not to come to the gala tonight. Jennifer, he never excludes me. Not once. I froze. If Daniel was trying to limit Elise's presence, it meant he wanted fewer eyes, fewer risks. He was tightening his circle. Stay safe, I told her quickly. Don't push him. Just watch. Tell me if he does anything unusual. I hung up, my chest heavy. Evelyn's plan was precise, but precision falters when the opponent makes a move you don't expect. Evening came. Julia and I stepped out of the car into the glow of camera flashes. The hotel sparkled with chandeliers visible through the glass, laughter spilling onto the marble steps. Guests in shimmering gowns and sharp tuxedos filled the entrance, every one of them eager to see Daniel Moreau's latest performance. Inside, the ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Golden light reflected off polished floors, champagne flowed freely, and at the center of it all stood Daniel. He was radiant in his tailored suit, greeting guests with that disarming smile I once thought belonged to me. His arm was draped around a woman I didn't recognize, tall, striking, her gown scarlet like fresh blood. Cameras swarmed as she lifted her hand, revealing a diamond ring so large it seemed to mock the room. Gasps rippled through the guests. Daniel raised his glass, his grin wide. "Tonight," he announced, "is not just about business. It's about love, about new beginnings. I am proud to introduce the woman who has brought light back into my life." The crowd erupted in applause. My heart stopped. Julia clutched my arm. "Engagement. He's announcing an engagement." I felt the ground tilt. Evelyn had predicted spectacle, yes, but not this. If Daniel reframed his story as a man bravely leaving his wife for true love, he could spin the scandal into a romance. By the time the filings hit the press, the narrative might already belong to him. Across the room, Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her eyes narrowing. She leaned to me, her whisper urgent. "The documents just leaked online. But Daniel has accelerated his game. He's trying to get ahead of us." On stage, Daniel held the woman's hand aloft like a trophy, his voice booming through the ballroom. "To new futures, to truth, to love." Applause thundered again. But just beneath it, I felt the faint vibration of my phone in my clutch. I pulled it out and my blood froze. Another anonymous message. "Careful, Jennifer. The gala will not end with his humiliation. It will end with yours." The words blurred. My breath caught. My heart slammed against my ribs. Daniel's voice soared across the room, his image glowing under golden chandeliers, while my screen whispered the threat I could not ignore. Tonight was supposed to be his collapse. But what if the trap was shifting, and I was the one about to fall? The chandeliers above the ballroom shimmered like captured constellations. Golden light pooled across marble floors, bouncing from crystal glasses raised in Daniel's honor. His voice carried easily, smooth as silk, as he introduced his fiancée to the crowd, basking in admiration. I stood near the back with Julia and Evelyn, my pulse drumming against my ribs. My gown clung to me like armor. The room buzzed with applause, laughter, champagne fizzing in every flute. On the surface it was triumph. But beneath it something shifted, the undercurrent of truth waiting to break. Evelyn's phone vibrated. She glanced at it, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "It's done," she murmured. "The filings are public. Every journalist here has the documents." My breath caught. The trap had been sprung. At first, the applause continued, Daniel basking in his own reflection. But then a ripple passed through the guests. Phones lit up in hands, faces bent toward screens. Whispers spread like smoke. A man near the front frowned, turning his phone toward his wife. Her eyes widened. Another guest gasped audibly. The crowd shifted. Daniel lifted his glass higher. "To truth, to love." A reporter's voice sliced through the noise. "Mr. Moreau, how do you respond to allegations of fraud in today's court filing?" Gasps rippled like a wave. Heads turned. Cameras swung toward him. Daniel faltered, his smile stiffening. "Excuse me." Another voice shouted from the press row. "The filing claims you diverted funds through shell companies. Is that true? And what about the documented affairs?" The room erupted. Questions collided, cameras flashed. Guests leaned forward in hungry disbelief. The scarlet-gowned woman on his arm stiffened, her smile cracking. Daniel tried to regain control, his hands raised. "These are lies. Fabrications from a bitter woman trying to." But Evelyn's voice rang out, sharp and unflinching from the back of the room. "Fabrications? The evidence includes your own receipts, your own signatures, your own messages. Deny it all you want, Daniel, but every guest here can read the truth on their phones." The crowd turned, eyes shifting from him to me, to the calm silence I wore like armor. Daniel's composure cracked. Sweat gathered at his temples, his jaw tightened, his smile warped into a snarl. "Jennifer," he barked, his voice carrying across the hall. "This is your doing." For a moment silence fell heavy. Dozens of eyes locked on me. My heart pounded, but I did not move. I only met his gaze and let the weight of my silence answer him. The woman in scarlet ripped her hand free from his, her diamond ring glinting under the chandelier. She hissed just loud enough for the nearest cameras to capture. "You disgust me." Then she dropped the ring into his glass. It clattered, splashing champagne across his suit. The crowd gasped, flashes erupting like fireworks. Daniel's empire began to crumble in real time. Investors slipped toward the exits, whispering. Donors raised brows, their admiration replaced with disdain. The press surged forward, shouting questions that stabbed sharper than knives. And still my phone vibrated in my clutch. My hand trembled as I pulled it out. Another message, anonymous, cutting straight through the chaos. "You wanted him ruined. Congratulations. But your secrets will be next." My stomach twisted. Secrets? What secrets? I had nothing to hide, or did I? The fear wasn't in the words themselves, but in the precision of their timing. Whoever sent them knew this was the moment of my greatest triumph, and they wanted to turn it into the start of my downfall. On stage, Daniel's voice cracked as he shouted over the crowd. "She set me up. She planted lies. Jennifer, tell them." But I said nothing. My silence was the loudest scream. The ballroom fractured into chaos. Reporters hurled accusations, cameras blinded, guests muttered and fled. The man who once ruled this stage now drowned in it. Yet as I stood frozen in the back, phone in hand, a chill cut through my victory. Adrian's destruction had begun, yes, but my war was far from over. Because while Daniel crumbled before the world, a new shadow had risen behind me. And if the message was true, my battle was only beginning. The ballroom had become a battlefield. Reporters swarmed the stage, microphones raised like weapons. Guests pressed toward the exits, their gowns brushing against marble floors, their shoes clicking frantically. Laughter was gone. In its place was a frenzy of whispers, questions, accusations. Daniel stood under the chandeliers like a man struck by lightning, his suit drenched in champagne, his fiancée's ring abandoned in his glass. His eyes darted wildly, sweat streaking his temple. Cameras flashed mercilessly, immortalizing his unraveling. Julia clutched my hand, whispering, "It's over. He's finished." But even as I watched Daniel's empire implode, my phone buzzed again in my clutch. "Your secrets are next." The words pulsed in my mind louder than the crowd. Evelyn guided us toward the side doors, her calm expression belying the storm. "Do not engage," she murmured. "The press will look for you. Silence is your greatest weapon now." We moved quickly, slipping through a service corridor. Behind us, Daniel's voice cracked, shouting over the noise. "Jennifer! Jennifer, you can't!" His words drowned in the roar of reporters demanding answers. Outside, the night air slapped against my skin, cold and sharp. Paparazzi swarmed the steps, lenses glinting, voices colliding. "Jennifer, did you leak the documents? Do you want Daniel imprisoned? Was this revenge?" The questions stabbed at me from every direction. I kept my chin high, my lips pressed shut. Evelyn's arm guided me through the storm. Silence again. My silence spoke volumes. We slid into the waiting car, doors slamming shut as flashes exploded against the windows. For a moment, the noise was cut off, replaced by the low hum of the engine. I exhaled shakily, my body trembling. Julia squeezed my hand. "You did it. He's destroyed." Evelyn nodded firmly. "The court of opinion is already turning. By tomorrow, investors will run, donors will cut ties. He cannot recover from this." But my hand still shook. Then why do I feel like this isn't victory? As if in answer, my phone buzzed again. This time the message was longer. "You think tonight ended his reign. But there are others who profited from his schemes. They won't let you stand untouched. Be careful, Jennifer. The stage you used to ruin him may become the one where you fall." I shoved the phone face down on the seat, my breath ragged. Julia frowned. "Who keeps sending these?" "I don't know," I whispered. And that was the truth. The car pulled away, leaving the hotel glowing in the rearview mirror. From the outside, it still looked like a palace of luxury. Inside, Daniel's downfall was sealed, captured on every camera. Tomorrow the world would wake to headlines shredding his name. But as the city lights blurred past, a knot of dread twisted in my chest. Daniel had been arrogant, careless, certain of his invincibility. But whoever hid behind those messages, they were careful, precise. They wanted me shaken, maybe even ruined. And they were succeeding. Back at my apartment, I collapsed into a chair, exhaustion crashing over me. Julia paced, furious. They're trying to scare you. Don't let them. Evelyn remained calm, though her eyes were sharp. We expected retaliation from Daniel, but this feels different. It may be someone else. Someone tied to his money. We'll prepare for it. Her steadiness anchored me. Yet as I lay in bed that night, sleep eluded me. My mind replayed every flash of the cameras, every whisper of the crowd, every message glowing on my phone. Daniel was ruined, yes. His empire cracked. His reputation burned. But the ashes did not bring me peace. Because even as the world celebrated my silence as triumph, I realized it might soon be demanded as defense. And the next storm would not be his, it would be mine. The morning after the gala, the city felt strangely quiet. But the silence was deceptive. Because everywhere I turned, on television, on social media, in the newspaper stacked outside the cafe on the corner, the noise of Daniel's downfall roared. Headlines screamed in bold type. Daniel Moreau exposed, fraud, affairs, collapse at gala. From mogul to manipulator. The scandal that shook the ballroom. Fiancé flees as documents reveal web of lies. On every channel, commentators replayed the same clips. Daniel sweating under the chandeliers, stammering as reporters hurled questions. The woman in scarlet ripping the ring from her hand and letting it fall into his glass. It had already become legend, a cautionary tale dressed in evening wear. Julia sat beside me at the kitchen table, scrolling furiously on her phone. Look at this, #Moreau exposed is trending worldwide. People are making memes of him trying to grab the ring before it hit the floor. Investors are pulling out, Jennifer. He's toxic now. Her words should have tasted like victory, but my stomach twisted instead. Because my phone, face down on the table, buzzed again. I turned it over slowly. Another message from the blocked number. Enjoy your victory. But remember, ashes spread. His ashes may stain you next. My blood ran cold. Evelyn arrived an hour later, carrying a stack of newspapers. She placed them on the table, her expression calm, though her eyes studied me carefully. It worked. He's finished in the court of public opinion. By the end of the week, his accounts will be frozen, his allies scattered. He'll be too busy scrambling to survive to come after you directly. I nodded, my hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. Then why does it feel like I'm still being hunted? Evelyn tilted her head. What do you mean? Wordlessly, I handed her the phone. She read the message, then set it down with deliberate care. This doesn't sound like Daniel. He's desperate, yes, but his style is anger, not poetry. This is someone else. Someone with more to lose if his downfall continues. Julia muttered. Maybe one of his partners. Or whoever was involved in those offshore accounts. Her words sank heavy into me. I thought back to the files on the second phone, transfers, shell companies, names I didn't recognize. I had assumed they were just Daniel's schemes. His greed turned into numbers. But what if he hadn't acted alone? What if exposing him had threatened people far more dangerous than him? The day passed in a blur of news alerts. Reports confirmed that major investors were severing ties. A prestigious law firm announced it would no longer represent him. A bank issued a statement freezing several of his accounts pending investigation. Even his charity board membership was revoked. By evening, Daniel was not a mogul but a pariah. Julia poured me a glass of wine, raising it like a toast. He's done, Jen. Completely done. You did it. But I couldn't celebrate. My phone buzzed again. This time the message was sharper. You've made enemies you don't see. Be careful which doors you open next. I set the phone down, my hand trembling. Julia frowned. Don't let them scare you. They want you shaken. But it was working. Because it wasn't fear of Daniel anymore. It was fear of shadows I couldn't name. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought of Elise, of the tremor in her voice when she warned me. He'll bury you in lies if you don't stop him first. What if the lies weren't only his? The city outside glowed with its usual rhythm. Traffic lights changing, buildings humming, life moving forward. But for me, everything had shifted. I had one yes. The world saw Daniel for what he was. But my war was not over. Because even as Daniel's empire collapsed in flames, I realized something terrifying. His fall might have only opened the door to a bigger battle. One that had my name etched on it. Weeks passed, and Daniel's name became less a reputation and more a warning. Once, he had been invited into boardrooms and ballrooms with open arms. Now, his invitations were rescinded. His photos splashed across tabloids as the face of arrogance exposed. Everywhere I turned, I saw the echoes of his fall. His penthouse, stripped of its grandeur, was quietly listed for sale. His company's office tower emptied as employees fled. Former friends released carefully crafted statements, their loyalty dissolving into polished denial. He had been so certain the world would always admire him. Instead, it devoured him. But victory did not bring the peace I expected. Because even as Daniel's empire burned, the messages did not stop. You think this is finished. It isn't. Others profited. Others are watching. Your silence may protect you, or it may destroy you. At first, I lived in fear of them. I double-checked locks, avoided empty streets, startled when strangers lingered too long near me. But as days turned into weeks, fear hardened into clarity. These messages weren't about Daniel anymore. They were about what his downfall threatened to reveal. Whoever sent them had secrets buried deeper than his. For years I had been blind, first to his betrayals, then to the larger shadows behind him. Now my eyes were open. One evening Julia asked me over dinner, "Do you regret it? Exposing him?" I thought of Elise, her trembling hand as she slipped me the note. Check his second phone. The small act of courage that had saved me from drowning in lies. I shook my head slowly. No. I regret the years I believed him, but I don't regret the moment I opened my eyes. Evelyn, too, reminded me often that revenge isn't always about destruction. It's about reclaiming your name, she said. And she was right. Daniel had tried to bury me in his story, painting me as weak, blind, replaceable. Now his name was in ruins and mine stood stronger than ever. But I knew the war wasn't over. The shadows would stir again, perhaps under new names with new faces. That warning on my phone, "Your secrets are next," echoed in my chest. So I prepared. I saved every file, every copy of evidence. I created new binders, blank for now, waiting to be filled with whatever truths I might need. Because survival, I had learned, is not about strength alone. It is about patience, about vigilance, about never closing your eyes again once you've opened them. Daniel had lost everything. His fortune, his fiancée, his empire, his pride. In the end, he wasn't the hunter. He was the prey. And me? I was no longer the woman he once called blind. I was the woman who turned silence into strategy, betrayal into proof, humiliation into power. My name is Jennifer. My husband thought he could deceive me forever. But one note, slipped into my purse, became the key to his ruin. He taught me a brutal lesson. That love without respect is nothing. That trust without truth is a lie. And that silence can be the sharpest weapon of all. Now I leave you with this. If you ever feel powerless in the face of betrayal, remember, betrayal reveals. It reveals who they are, but more importantly, it reveals who you can become. Do not crumble. Do not let them write your story. Collect your truth, find your allies, and when the moment comes, let the world see their lies. Because dignity cannot be stolen. It can only be surrendered. And I will never surrender mine again. If Jennifer's story moved you, share it. Let it remind someone who feels powerless that silence can be strategy, patience can be power, and truth is the ultimate revenge. Subscribe for more stories of betrayal, justice, and women who refuse to be erased.